welcome to High Cheese with Darren Maloney. Today is April 25th, 2022. And before I start, I just want to wish our friends in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church a happy Easter. They had celebrated Easter yesterday, which was Sunday, April 24th. And I just want to wish everyone a happy Easter. I'm sure it's trying times for Americans here with friends and family in Ukraine. And I just want to wish you a happy Easter. Now, with that said, I want to switch to a clip from the Deputy National Security Advisor, John Feiner. And apparently, Ukraine's won the war. So let me switch to this clip. It's from Meet the Press. So let's go to the clip, and we'll come back and discuss.
So then, by that logic, is the broader policy goal to see Ukraine defeat Russia writ large?
In our view, Russia has already lost many of its initial war aims. They have intended to divide the West. They have resulted in a West and a NATO alliance that is much more united than it's ever been. They thought that they would unsettle and undermine and maybe even overthrow the Ukrainian government. President Zelensky is firmly entrenched in power, and Ukrainian democracy continues. Russia is more isolated than the world. Its economy is weaker. They are failing at virtually every one of their initial objectives, and our objective is going to be to continue that trend.
I guess that this is another campaign worker that got a job as a national security advisor. I mean, you talk about the most inept people that are in charge right now. Ukraine has won the war. Now, he's saying that, Russia lost the war. Well, the implication is that Ukraine won. And you talk about an administration and an individual that is just out of touch. And look at his metrics, these metrics for winning the war. Essentially saying, Russia hasn't divided the West. Oh, really? Tell that to Germany. Why does Russia continue to pump natural gas and oil to Germany, thus funding Russia's war against Ukraine? Is that unified? When one of your largest members of NATO still is funding the war? That's absolutely absurd, Feiner. He's unified NATO? Really? Tell that to Hungary. Now, here's the interesting thing, too. Oh, yeah, he's unified NATO. A report just came out from Newsweek. I think it was from early April. And it had to do with the contributions made to NATO. And looky here. Now, according to the rules of NATO, each individual member has to contribute 2% of their GDP to defense. And this is what Trump has been on for years and years, getting everybody to pay their fair share. So look what we have here. We've got deadbeats. And this is as of April 1st, I believe, earlier in the month. And this is a Newsweek article. We've got Germany. Germany, who's funding the war. They only contribute 1.49% to NATO. We've got Canada. Justin Trudeau. They're funding 1.36% of their GDP to NATO. You see, Trudeau's too busy attacking his truckers and his citizens instead of contributing to NATO. That's what he's focused on. He'd rather call his truckers terrorists than funding NATO. So I guess, Feiner, you're wrong so far. If you had a unified NATO, they'd all be contributing their fair share. And there's a number of other countries that are not contributing to NATO. Look at Luxembourg, 0.57%. And then he goes on, and then Feiner goes on to talk about, we won because Russia didn't meet their initial objectives. You have absolutely no idea what Russia's initial objectives were. And they talk about taking Kiev. He didn't take Kiev. But who says he wanted Kiev initially? What I think Russia did was give Ukraine a big old head fake They put some troops up around Kiev, and they caused the Ukrainians to put their best forces in defense of Kiev. Meanwhile, the Russian forces were flattening Mariupol and eastern Ukraine. So maybe Putin gave you a big old head fake, and you just don't want to admit it. And again, I am not supporting Putin. But what I am against is a bunch of knuckleheads in the United States government that are getting Ukrainians killed, that is decimating that country over there, all because we have a policy of just give them enough to keep themselves alive in Ukraine. Just enough. And I think it was my last episode, or two episodes, I mentioned Noam Chomsky, the left-wing professor. He was critical of the U.S. policy. He said that the U.S. policy right now is to get every Ukrainian killed. So we've sent Secretary of State Blinken and Lloyd Austin to Ukraine on Sunday, yesterday, Easter, Ukrainian Easter. And let me just tell you here, we've got some mixed messages coming out. It says here, Blinken says, when it comes to Russia's war aims, Russia is failing. Ukraine is succeeding, he said. And this is Blinken. And then you have Austin coming out and saying, oh no, we just want to weaken Russia. That's our objective. Well, what is it? We've got one person saying Ukraine's won. We've got the Department of Defense saying that, oh no, we just want to weaken Russia. And then we've got Blinken, the Secretary of State, saying, when it comes to Russia's war aims, Russia is failing. Well, what is it? These are all amorphous comments. And it's just indicative of an incompetent administration. And I've been saying all along, somebody has to talk to Zelensky. And Zelensky has to realize this. He's not going to win. Now, Russia announced, I think, Saturday that they are now letting everybody know what their objective is. And their objective is to take eastern and southern Ukraine. Now, how's that going to work out for you, Zelensky, when they take eastern and southern Ukraine? You can't stop them. It's just a matter of time. Most people are now coming to the realization that Russia will win a long, drawn-out war. So Russia takes eastern Ukraine, southern Ukraine, resulting in a Ukraine that is now landlocked. Now, before the war, they had access to the Black Sea. They will no longer have that if Russia meets its objectives. Right now, they're getting close to it, or I should say closer to it. I mean, take a look at the map. You tell me that Ukraine's winning this battle? And again, we are not helping in this country by funding the Ukrainians in this. And somebody has to talk to Zelensky. There's two things that should happen right now. One is this war will stop if Germany stops buying natural gas, which they won't. And if somebody talks to Zelensky and say, hey, look, you're never going to win. All this equipment and money we give you, it's just going to prolong the inevitable. I'm sorry. It's just the reality. The reality is that Ukraine will never win this war. And the other thing, too, is that with Feiner, he's got these metrics that he talks about winning, but he never talks about the human catastrophe here. The tens of thousands of Ukrainians that have lost their lives. And soldiers, too, on both sides. But that's not part of the metric. Do you know why? Because in their mind, those other people fight the wars, not us. We go tell them to fight. And we'll define what the victory is. Doesn't matter how many people die. Because again, these are the unwashed people. And it's shameful. And this is what we have in the U.S. government today. So one thing Biden did do, he nominated Bridget Brink as the new U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. Nothing much to see here, just a career bureaucrat, probably a swamp creature. All right, we shall see. Okay, while we're in Europe, let's take a look at the French election. The globalist Macron beat Marine Le Pen, the far-right candidate, 58-42. The upside for Le Pen is that she increased her number of votes from the last time she ran against Macron. I think the last time she ran against Macron, I think it was 2017, 2018, she garnered 33% of the vote. This time she garnered 42% of the vote. So she's headed in the right direction. However, I'm not sure if she's the candidate to bring her party over the edge. She did not have a good debate against Macron. Their one and only debate, she did not show very well. But the promising thing is, I was looking at some of the polls, and Macron got a big, wide margin of the over 65 vote by a wide margin. I thought it was 70-30. However, Le Pen had garnered the under 65 vote. And it just so happened that the margin that Macron won with the old vote, that vote over 65 years old, just was enough to put him over. But look, the future is promising. You know, the young French citizens have just had enough of what's going on in that country. They want to keep their culture. They like their culture. And they want a future that provides them with a job, that provides them with a good way of life. And let me just read an article from the Atlantic magazine about the election yesterday. And the Atlantic magazine is a leftist magazine. So let me just read a little to get a little framework of what happened yesterday. And the headline says, Macron won, and so did the far right. It says, Marine Le Pen had her best performance to date and has successfully pushed many of her far-right ideas into the mainstream. It says here, for the second time in a row, Emmanuel Macron emerged victorious against his far-right rival, Marine Le Pen, in what was a tighter contest than their one 5 years ago. But Le Pen didn't sound defeated. In her concession speech last night, she praised the results, her best electoral performance to date, as a resounding victory, and suggested that this election would not mark the end of her political career. In this defeat, she told reporters, I cannot help but feel a sense of hope. And that feeling isn't unfounded. Macron's decisive victory notwithstanding, Le Pen is not walking away empty-handed. In a little more than a decade, she has succeeded in transforming her party, the National Rally, from a toxic fringe group to one of the most significant players in French politics. She has advanced to the presidential runoff twice, but perhaps most significant of all, she has normalized her far-right politics on Islam and immigration and has forced her mainstream opponent, Macron among them, to engage with, and in some cases even appropriate her views. So anyway, we shall see. Well, Donald Trump was in Ohio this weekend at a rally, and I'm going to go to a clip, and it's a clip specifically about climate change. And you may wonder why I am specifically showing this clip about climate change with Trump. And when we get back, we'll discuss. Trump, although he's a businessman, he's got tremendous political instincts. And so let me play the clip.
Our country are trying to replace COVID crisis hysteria with climate crisis hysteria. And they're trying to replace COVID emergency powers with climate emergency powers. You see it happening all the time. And by the way, you see what's happening also with the masks. They want the masks to start because they want it for the election, JD. They want the masks on, and they want those mail-in ballots where they can cheat like hell. They're trying to figure it out. And these extremists don't use the term global warming anymore because it was getting cooler and the term wasn't working. So now they simply use the word climate change because that covers if it gets cooler or hotter or water up, water down. It doesn't matter. Whatever the hell happens, climate change, you're covered. We're 100% covered. They went through all the global warming stuff, but it was just not playing. Climate change, no matter what happens, when you say that, you're okay. In the Republican Party, we reject every single left-wing energy mandate and restriction.
So here's what you have to realize that's going on right now in the basement of the Democratic Party. They're doing these focus groups right now, and they want to know what are important topics to voters, particularly their voters. And what they do then is they take that information and they hand it off to producers that they are in contact with in the media. Listen, we'd like you to run these stories. It may be helpful to run these stories. And we're seeing that right now. And in the one case, we've got global warming as a topic. And dollars to donuts is that global warming is showing a high response with the Democratic focus groups. So this is going to be one of the topics they're going to push. And they start pushing it right now. And as you see, and I just want to point out the fact that you've got an article on global warming in Bloomberg. And essentially it says here, climate change threatens Europe with new weather extremes. It says 2021 was a year of extreme weather and natural disasters for the continent, from heat waves to flooding and droughts. And this is by John Anger. It says climate change produced another record-breaking year of extreme weather in Europe in 2021, triggering catastrophic flooding and the hottest summer on record, according to scientists at the Copernicus Climate Change Service. Apparently, that's some service in Europe that's funded by all the countries out there to push climate change. And, of course, Bloomberg is going to pick up on that, and one of his writers is going to push this because they're in bed with the Democrats. So, you know, when people talk about the connections between the media and the Democratic Party, this is where there's the connection. It's the connection between these focus groups that the Democratic parties produce and their contacts in the media. So they're now pushing, the media is now pushing these topics that the Democrats think are going to be important to them in the midterm elections. And Trump is getting ahead of this by framing it himself. So he understands this. And the thing in politics is that you've got to frame the issues. And Trump is getting ahead of the curve in Ohio with trying to formulate what his position is and what the natural position is on climate change. So anyway, the funny thing is, in this Bloomberg article here, it was catastrophic. Climate change is causing terrible flooding in Europe. And what they don't tell you is that there's no real correlation between floods and climate change. They've never made that connection. And they cite the Copernicus Climate Change Service annual report. The interesting thing is when I went to the annual report at Copernicus, it says here, here's their bullet points. It says here, 1, there has been a long-term warming of surface air temperature over Europe's land region. They don't tell you how long. They don't tell you what any more detail than that. But listen to this. This is the second bullet point. 2021 was much cooler than most recent years, but still warmer than the average for the reference period. And I was looking at Anger's article, and he buries this until one of the last paragraphs in his article. It says here, summer was the warmest on record at 1% Celsius above average, while spring was cooler than the average by less than 1/2 of a degree Celsius. This is the game that the global warming people play. And they just throw junk out there, numbers and junk that really don't relate to anything. And here's the interesting thing I always find. If you ever get in an argument with somebody about global warming, you can even ask these scientists that believe in global warming, and you ask them what human impact that global warming has today on weather, and they'll say marginal at best. So, for example, a hurricane. A hurricane will do marginally more damage than a hurricane without global warming, for lack of a better word. But even those scientists, most of them, Most of those pro-global warming scientists will tell you that the effect of these storms is marginal. And they have yet to make a connection between global warming and all these other events, flooding, that happen. And I just find it really unique. The other thing, too, is that they never fail to tell you is that the damage done by some of these, let's use a hurricane, for example. You know, you get the news come out, oh, you got billions and billions of dollars of damage from this hurricane. Well, that billions of dollars in damage is because of natural population expansion. So say, for example, you have a tornado that runs through Oklahoma in 1910 versus the same tornado with the same power that runs through Oklahoma in 2020. Now, in 2020, there's a vast population in that same area where there was no population earlier. So they failed to tell you that. It's all about deception. And when you really look into the numbers, it's meaningless in the sense that the conclusion that they make is more conspiracy theory than anything else. Now, I personally believe that climate's always changing. Throughout an entire history of this world, the climate has always changed. And to me, it's a little bizarre when a certain segment of the population try to pin it on humans' own existence as a driver of this change. Now, maybe on the margins, possibly, at best. But it doesn't warrant any of these draconian government policies that you hear, and these policies that take away your rights. So to me, this is their religion. They have to sacrifice something to the gods of climate. Remember years ago, people used to sacrifice their kids to the gods? Well, today these climate people, they want to sacrifice our lifestyles. And in some cases, our kids. Because quite frankly, if you make your life so unaffordable because of these climate controls that are put down by these centralized governments, you can't afford to take your kid to the doctor. And they don't understand this. They really don't, because it's a religion to them. It's a cult. And hopefully it will be broken by the end of Trump's next term. Now, the second thing I wanted to touch upon also is that the other pillar of the Democrats in the midterm election is going to be J6, these J6 hearings. And if you took a look at Sunday's 60 Minutes, they had Chris Wray. They interviewed Chris Wray with a puff piece. And they made him sound like a great guy, an honorable guy, a great American. They didn't ask him any tough questions about what's his position with defunding the police. What does he have to say about the infiltration of FBI agents in Michigan? Were there FBI agents during the J6? They didn't ask him that because they need him. They need him to do two things: either keep his mouth shut and tell his subordinates to keep their mouth shut during this, so the Democrats can have a free-for-all during these J6 hearings. That's why they're doing this. But Wray not only sent a message that he was going to keep quiet, he also sent a message that he was going to be active in this hearing. When he told Scott Pelley from 60 Minutes that January 6th was a terrorist attack, well, he just told all the Democrats, yeah, I'm on board, guys. You need me to support you on anything? You got it. So we're on to them. Trump is on to them. And you want to talk, before I go, I want to talk about conspiracy theories. A Rasmussen poll came out last week, and it said that 72% of Democrats believe that it's likely that Russia changed the outcome of the 2016 presidential election. Even with all this stuff coming out, that's a conspiracy theory. These are all conspiracy theorists here. So I don't want to hear anything about, oh, these Republican conspiracies. It's nonsense. The Democrats are the conspiracy theorists. Okay, this just came in. A federal judge will temporarily block Biden administration from lifting Title 42. It says here, a federal judge said he will temporarily block the Biden administration from ending the Trump-era Title 42 policy that expels migrants from the United States border to avoid the spread of COVID-19. Centers for Disease Control and Protection announced in April that the policy would be rescinded on May 23rd. In a lawsuit filed by 21 Republican-led states, U.S. District Judge Robert Summerhays of Louisiana said in a notice on Monday that he will grant a temporary restraining order blocking the end of Title 42. Summerhays was appointed by Donald Trump. So this is good. It's good news. It blocks the Biden administration from letting Title 42 lapse until this lawsuit by these Republican states is litigated. So again, we shall see on this. And isn't it a shame how we have to go to the courts to protect our own borders from the Biden administration? Meanwhile, the Biden administration is sending billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine to protect their border. It's disturbing. But anyway, let's go to business. Top business news today was Elon Musk is buying Twitter. And look, I'm happy from the perspective that Musk is a free speech guy, and Twitter, as it is run right now, is not free speech. So I like that. That's a good thing. But again, Musk has a relationship with China, with his Tesla factories. And he is also into the transhumanism. Now, I wouldn't call him a transhumanist at this point, but he understands that there's potential for transhuman activity. He says it's dangerous, but he is still looking into it. With that said, let's take a look at the Dow. The Dow had a wild day today. There was about a 700-point swing between its low and its ending price today. And, that's not a good sign for the markets. They're swaying between the Fed increasing rates, and then, they hear that this Shanghai shutdown is going to affect the world economy and our ability to get product here. So they don't know today. They may not know tomorrow. Now, this week is going to be driven by earnings, and is a big earnings calendar, as well as the economic calendar. So there's a lot of tech stocks reporting this week. And let me just go to the Dow. The Dow finished up 0.7% to 34,049.46 year to date. The Dow is down 6.3%. The S&P finished up 0.57% to 4296.12. Year to date, the S&P is down 9.86%. NASDAQ finished up 1.29% to 13,004.85. Year to date, NASDAQ is down 16.88%. Oil, WTI, finished down 3.5% to $98.54 per barrel. The 10-year bond finished down 8.4 basis points. That's a lot. To 2.822%. Spot gold finished down 1.66% to $1,897.65 per ounce, and spot silver finished down 2.2% to $23.61 an ounce. Bitcoin right now is trading at 7 o'clock in the evening on 4/25/22. Bitcoin is trading at $40,281.35. Ethereum is trading at $3,008.12, and XRP is trading at 69 cents. And let's look at the earnings schedule. We got a lot of heavy hitters coming up, and there's a number of earnings coming up this week. Tomorrow, Tuesday, April 26th, we have Microsoft, Alphabet, Visa, Capital One, UPS, among others. On Wednesday, April 27th, we have Meta, T-Mobile, Qualcomm, Boeing, PayPal, Ford, O'Reilly Auto Parts. Then on Thursday, the 28th, we have Apple, Amazon, MasterCard, Samsung, Eli Lilly, Merck, Intel, Caterpillar, McDonald's. And then on Friday, we have Berkshire Hathaway, Exxon, AstraZeneca, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Colgate Palmolive. Let's go to the economic calendar. And we've got a lot on the calendar this week. And tomorrow, Tuesday, April 26th, we have durable good orders, core capital equipment orders. The S&P Case-Shiller U.S. Home Price Index year over year. The FHFA U.S. Home Price Index year over year. Consumer confidence and new home sales. On Wednesday, we have the advanced report on international trade in goods, pending home sales, and the rental vacancy rate. Then on Thursday, we have the usual initial jobless claims, continuing jobless claims, and then we have real gross domestic product year over year, first estimate. And then we have the real final sales of domestic product, first estimate. Then on Friday, we have the employment cost index. We have the PCE price index. We have the core PCE price index. We have the PCE price index year over year and core PCE price index year over year. Remember, this is an important number for the Fed. We have nominal personal income. We have nominal consumer spending. We have real disposable incomes, real consumer spending, the Chicago Purchasing Managers Index, and the University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Index. So there's a really quite a bit of items, whether it's on the economic calendar or whether it's in earnings, that will have an impact on this week's market. And if today is any indication, it's going to be a wild ride again. And you have a good week, and I shall see you on Saturday, and thanks for listening.